Good morning. Good morning. I'm also comprehensive. Good morning. Jeff. This is Zambia. Good morning. I'm Mandela. Good morning. I know it's Malama from Data. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Darius. Good morning.
Okay, thank you so much. I will also ask our high table to just introduce themselves and the organization that they represent.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gideon Musonda, Executive Director for Advocates for Democratic Governance Foundation.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is from the Zambia Council for Development.
Good morning, colleagues. Maurice Nyambe from TIZ.
Good morning, everyone. I am Josiah Kalala from Japan.
Good morning, colleagues and members of the press. My name is Muzi Kalanga. I'm from Wood of Zambia.
Okay. Thank you so much for the round of introductions. The program has been shared. Right now, we'll go straight into our coming remarks, and we invite the Executive Director for Transparency International Zambia to will come as an official open this presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Chimuka, and good morning once again, colleagues and members of the press. I would like to welcome you to the TIZ, but also to this very important press briefing that we have today. I think I mentioned in his remarks about the subject matter over which we have been today, where the president is making some remarks, as well as other people are speaking about the constitutional making process. Colleagues, you will know that this is an issue that has been of interest to us for a very long time now. I think even just from the time that the current administration was voted into office, I think this is the call that we have been making since then. And so we are seeing a heightened increase in terms of interest in this particular matter. And we thought it wise just to convene in a manner such as this so that we can just speak to some of the issues, some of the concerns that we have. And the joint statement that is going to be delivered very shortly, we hear a lot of the thinking that has been happening as far as CSOs are concerned. But I also wanted to mention that us having a joint briefing in the manner that we're having today is really just to demonstrate the unity of purpose that we have over this particular issue. And I think that is a message that we would like to send out very strongly. So I'd like to thank all the organizations that are represented here, represented by the executive directors that are here with me, but also thanking you, the media, for having found time to come and relatively short notice so that we can have this conversation together. So with that, I say welcome to all of you, and I declare, is there such a thing as declaring a press conference open? Yeah, we can get moving. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Morris and Nyambe, for your coming remarks. Right now, we will go straight into the keynote address. That's a reading of the statement, the joint CSO statement of constitution reforms. We'll allow the media maybe 1 minute to state, and then we'll invite the executive director for Zambia Council for Social Development, who will deliver the statement for us.
So, good morning once again, colleagues, media. The fourth estate, I think we deem you as a very important partner to civil society but then also the country at large. And thank you so much to Comrade Nyambe for the welcome to TNZ's offices. We feel at home when we're here. I would like to also recognize the presence of my fellow EDs, CSPTA, ADEG, Chapter 1 Foundation, as well as Yoda. And of course, later on, as I end reading this civil society, you also get to understand the other organizations that are part of this joint statement from civil society. We, the undersigned civil society organizations, wish to express our deep concern regarding the proposed amendments to the Constitution of Zambia, Amendment Act of 2016, as announced by the Republican President, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, on the 8th of March, 2025, during the commemoration of the International Women's Day in Asama. And I think we've also noticed that following that announcement, some key government officials have also spoken to this. While civil society organizations understand that has repeatedly raised the need to amend the Republican Constitution in order to usher in a democratic constitution that promotes good governance, inclusiveness, citizen participation, accountability, and the separation of powers between the three arms of government, that is to say the judiciary, legislature, and executive. It is our fervent belief that any meaningful constitutional reform process should not be devoid of national consensus. We therefore are of the considered view that any rushed, piecemeal amendment shall not deliver the durable, credible, and relevant supreme law that Zambians have craved for decades. I think earlier on, Comrade Morris did mention that this process has been with us for decades. We draw the attention of the nation to the process undertaken during the Constitution of Zambia, Amendment Bill number 10 of 2019, which was popularly known as Bill 10, and warn against taking constitutional reform that are not demand-driven, and to say citizens-driven. We remain gravely concerned that the proposed amendment process will not be centered on the will of the people of Zambia and start to undermine the democratic process for delivering a national constitution. Specifically, our concerns with the proposed amendment process, as announced recently, are as follows. Number one, we believe as civil society that there's been a lack of genuine consultation with people. As civil society organizations, we have always held the view that in constitution making process protects content. And the announcement for a constitutional amendment with a detailed and clear roadmap that provides clarity on the proposed scope of the amendments, proposed timelines, especially for grassroots level consultations, is unacceptable. CSOs hold the view that this approach will not deliver a comprehensive process to allow and address current problematic clauses in the Constitution, including clarity for the review of the Bill of Rights, which is the heartbeat of our constitutional order. Number two, civil society that have signed up to this statement believe that lack of a clear and transparent roadmap, the announcement of a constitutional amendment process comes without a clear roadmap that provides clarity on the proposed scope of the amendments, proposed timelines, especially for grassroots level consultations, the specific clauses of the Constitution proposed for amendment are said and not known. CSOs hold the view that this approach will not deliver a comprehensive process to address current problematic clauses, including clarity for the review of the Bill of Rights, which is critical for guaranteeing the legal framework for economic, cultural, and social rights for Zambian citizens. Third, our concern is around proportional representation. CSOs question if the government has a clear proposed model for genuine representation of women and young people, as well as other marginalized groups, aside from the strategy to increase the number of constituencies through the proposed delimitation exercise. We hold the view that empowering women and other marginalized groups yields persons with disabilities in decision-making goes beyond undertaking a delimitation exercise through the national constitution, but requires additional reforms to, for example, introduce a quota system across all political parties to ensure adoption of women and other marginalized groups is not just flaunted in areas where male candidates are seen to be weaker, as has been the common trend. In addition, we recommend the consideration for the introduction of additional non-constituency deficits through a mixed member representation system. Further, we draw the nation to Article 68, subsection 2B, as read with Article 69, wherein the Republican President is empowered to nominate 8 members of Parliament necessary to enhance the representation of special interests, skills, or gender in the National Assembly. As we now understand, the exercise of this special power by the Constitution in its limited manner, the Republican President has nominated only 2 women out of the 8 seats, and no youth, no differently abled or minority group nominated to the National Assembly via this power. Perhaps demonstrative of a lack of political will to seriously address the gender parity of women representation and other special interest groups, even with the limited options that the current constitution offers in addressing the advanced reasons for constitutional amendments announced by the President. Number 4, CSOs are concerned with the 2025 fiscal constraints on the budget. And when we're looking at this, we're also looking at the budgets beyond, because it's not, the budget will not just be required for the constitution making process. Beyond the change, beyond the blotting of parliamentary seats, we will require resources to implement the new seats. The constitution amendment process is a complex and large undertaking requiring significant resources for enabling strong citizen participation in the reform process. Given Zambia's current fiscal position, it is our view that the national budget for 2025 and those that will come after might not be able to absorb this cost, given the continued widening of its fiscal deficit beyond the 6.4% expression. The country is grappling with debt service payments and a high public wage bill, which have continued to consume over 50% of allocated expenditure for 2025. Therefore, proceeding with this undertaking will mean realigning spending priorities amidst an already tight fiscal position. Considering the country has just come out of the drought situation, which greatly affected our financial position, it will not be prudent for government to undertake this reform process at this time, as this will come at a strain to the national envelope for 2025. Number 5, we are concerned, and our concern is around the rush constitutional reforms. The undersigned civil society organizations hold the view that the proposed reforms to the Constitution are rushed, given that the country has about 18 months until the 2026 general elections, a time frame not sufficient to deliver a comprehensive constitutional review. Further, CSOs have repeatedly urged the government to initiate a constitutional reform process early in its term of office. This did not happen. It is now our considered view that a rush to amend the constitution ahead of the next election will be politically motivated. The approach proposed is similar to the attempt made by the previous patriotic front government to amend the constitution for self-serving reasons, which was roundly rejected by the people of Zambia. During the campaign for the infamous Bill 10, women and youth participation were used as a smokescreen for politically motivating proposed amendments. With the undersigned, CSOs see the fronting of in the president's announcement as a repeat of what was done before by the predecessor government, the PS. CSOs are left with the understanding that these proposed intentions may be politically motivated to support a delimitation exercise using women and youth engagement as a front. Number 6, civil society wishes to categorically state that it understands the mounting pressure on politicians as the country moves to the next general elections, but rejects being used to rubber stamp a flawed process that lacks public demand and broad-based consultations. Instead, CSOs advance that if government is sincere, it will undertake an inclusive and transparent process, and he to advise to postpone this undertaking. Number 7, CSOs further advance that the country is facing significant economic hardships that have inflated the cost of living, making unaffordable most basic needs for many Zambians. More recently, the World Bank Poverty and Equity Assessment Report of 2025, covering the period 2015 to 2022, ranked Zambia as the 6th most impoverished country globally and 4th highest in Africa, competing only with countries in difficult contexts such as war. Given this background, our view is that the priority and the focus of the government, the UPND government, should be alleviating current economic challenges and making more affordable the cost of basic needs, particularly focusing on reducing food inflation, which remains extremely high at 20%. The constitutional review process at this point is not a priority and can be undertaken at a later stage, ideally post-2026 elections. Based on the above, we demand that the government immediately halt this rushed process and instead commit to a post-2026 process that will ensure adequate resources are committed, a clear roadmap is developed, and broad-based consultations are enabled for a participatory constitutional review process. We call upon citizens, traditional leaders, faith-based organizations, women, and the youths, other stakeholders, to demand a transparent and accountable constitutional reform process that will also incorporate the referendum process to adopt an expanded Bill of Rights. As civil society organizations, we remain committed to monitoring any proposed review of the Constitution to ensure it reflects the will of the governed and not the government. This statement has been jointly signed by the following civil society organizations. Number 1, the Alliance for Community Action, SEA. Number 2, ActionAid Zambia, AAZ. Number 3, Alliance for Accountability Advocates Zambia, AAZ. Number 4, Advocates for Democratic Governance Foundation, ADEG. Number 5, Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, CSPTA. Number 6, Center for the Trade Policy and Development, CTPD. Number 7, Chapter 1 Foundation, HOF. Number 8, Transparency International Zambia, TIZ. Number 9, Women and Law in Southern Africa, WILSA. Number 10, Women for Change, WFC. Number 11, Women in Law and Development in Africa, WILDA. Number 12, Zambia Alliance of Women, ZAW. Number 13, the Zambia Council for Social Development, ZCSD. And number 14, the Zambian Governance Foundation, ZGF. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that statement. At this particular point in time, we will allow the media to interact with the high table in terms of questions, comments, and we ask that maybe questions can be confined to the topic of discussion for today. So it's open. Colleagues from the media, you can ask the question. Yes, sir. Your name and the media organization.
My name is Tom Cook from the Mass Minister. The President, on the 8th of March, as someone mentioned, we agreed and we were quoted by civil society organization. As everyone had agreed to this constitution amendment, I just wanted to get clarity. Then the other one is your action should the government still continue to go ahead with this constitutional amendment. That is your action. Bearing in mind that the Council Alliance has stepped up to conduct countrywide demonstrations over the same. Then the other last question is, we are seeing that the democratic political dispensation in the country has gone a little bit down, where citizens are being arrested for speaking against the cost of living and speaking against the same topic on constitution, where citizens' voices are being silenced. So I just wanted to get the civil society organization, your point of view on these three matters that are faced. But of course, I know we have some networking and be able to chat more on other issues.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll take two more. This is us, the three. Yes?
My name is Nolan from Matifi. I don't remember very well that in 2022, getting into 2023 after March, somewhere there, the Zambia Development Agency had spearheaded the process to this amendment of the constitution, of which some of the CEOs were there, various representation from the opposition, the opposition political leaders, and in March, a meeting was held together with other stakeholders at NGOCC Regional Conference towards the same issue of the constitution. I'd like you to make a clarity on what was happening there and if it is not part of the same process which is being talked about.
Okay. One more for this round. Okay, maybe we can allow the high table to respond to the four questions. So the first one was on CSOs have been quoted by the president to have agreed that we need the constitution reform processes. The gentleman wants to understand where was this agreed. The second question is what is your action to stop the proposed constitution amendments as compared to what the other political parties have done? They are demonstrating that CSOs, what are you going to do? Are you just going to end with a statement? Okay, then the other one is shrinking democratic space. All right.
I can take the first question on when consensus happens. I think it's important for us to recognize where this process came from. Shortly after the 2021 elections, the government announced a three-phase approach to constitutional reforms. They said the first phase is to deal with contentious clauses. The second would be to deal with non-content. First to deal with non-contentious, then contentious, and then the Bill of Rights. And then between then, the government position changed. And the president is on record as saying there no constitutional reforms until the people demanded it. I believe the Minister of Information repeated this message, and civil society advocated for constitutional reforms. So the only consensus that's there is that we need to review the constitution. That's the consensus that's been there from civil society, and now repeated by government. Something important to remember is that consensus for constitution making happens at different levels, and this is where we have differences. So We need consensus on the process. What's the process going forward? There's been no consensus on that. We need consensus on what the objective of the process would be. Are we doing comprehensive reforms? Are we doing partial reforms? There's been no consensus on that. We also need consensus on the substantive provision of the Constitution. There's been no consensus on that. And then we also need consensus on the principle. We only have consensus right now on the principle that we need to review our Constitution, but we haven't had consensus on these other important subjects. And before you go into the process, you need to have this consensus, and that's part of our concern. So I'll answer just that part, and maybe yeah, that's the only question.
Okay, thank you so much. Sir. Second question, or is an addition?
No.
That's it.
So I wanted to address the issue of rural democracy.
So then let me add to what Council was talking about. Civil society consistently, for as far back as the working for, we've always advocated for a comprehensive review of the Constitution, not piecemeal amendments, number one. Number two, we know that with the 2016 amendment, we left out the Bill of Rights. And so it's possibly categorical. So the Bill of Rights is one big part that we want on the table. What we're hearing now seems to be delimitation. So whose interest is delimitation going to serve? Is it the people? And if it's the people, is that the priority at the moment? Those are some of the questions we have around that.
That's why I want to comment on the question around the express of building democracy. Colleagues are aware that we have raised concern on this issue at various platforms, various times, discussing this one. And to the larger extent, we have been pushing for those have been pushing against the laws, that contribute to the shrinking civic space. So in a democracy, we expect that there should be freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association. But what we have been seeing from government side is that there has been a violations on these freedoms, like you had alluded to, the unlawful arrests, detentions that has been happening. You are aware that we pushed back on laws that shrink the civic space, such as the Abuse of Public Order Act, the Cybercrime and Cybersecurity Act. These laws contain provisions that are easily abused by those in authorities to shrink the civic space. They contribute to the dwindling of democracy as we had referred to. So obviously you saw the report that was, the preliminary report that was released by the UN Rapporteur. It just confirms many of the issues that we have raised around democracy and how we perceive, how we are faring in terms of the civic and political space. So our recommendation is that quickly government should prioritize law reform, such as repeal and replacement of Public Order Act, You are aware that there has been a public gathering bill in the offing. So we want that to be expedited so that, we can have some reform in that area. But also, you are aware that there is Cyber Security and Cyber Crime Act, that is under, review. Currently, there are two proposed bills that are sitting at Parliament, and most likely they are to be tabled on 18th, I think, according to the government, schedule in terms of when they intend to present that second reading in Parliament. So our push is that, in as much as we realize that yes, it's important that there has to be, needs to deal with the abuse of social media or the online space, but it's important that the reviews promote the freedoms that are associated to, democracy, even as people interact in the digital space. Yeah. So in terms of the two bills, obviously we are in engagement with government. Our hope is that the content of the first bills that were released initially that we rejected will change so that we can have the provision that will promote democracy, provision that will expand the civic and political space. Yeah. So it's just our hope that government, should ensure that they uphold, good governance through promotion of democracy. Yeah, and in terms of measurements of civic space, it's important that the standard is set according to our constitutions, but also our the international standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sanyam. Maybe let me first take on a question that I think has not been replied to from FODEP. But in 2022 and 2023, the Zambia Law Development Commission held a constitutional making of the process, if I got it right. And we're civil society part of this, and why are we changing our position now? If I get you right, the Zambia Law Development Commission is a statutory body created to help in the development of legislative framework for Zambia. And one of the things they do is to also engage with members of the public on many other facets relating to the subject of lawmaking. Be it the Constitution, be it the NGO Act, or be it the Penal Code, as they had done with your radio station in 2023, I think, because I remember attending about 2 or 3 programs with them on your station. So that is their mandate. And in 2023, about September thereabout, they held a seminar, a 1-day seminar, with a very few selected members of the public, from the academia, from the practicing, from lawyers who are practicing, as well as civil society organizations and the diplomatic corps, to just look at the subject of constitution-making process in Zambia, finding a way forward. I think that was the subject under which they held that. I remember the Attorney General opening that seminar. It was a 1-day seminar. And it's just bringing together members of different fields to discuss how best can we have a constitution that answers to the needs and aspirations of the people of Zambia. I think that seminar should not be mistaken for a constitution-making process. Let's be very, very clear about that. It was just a seminar to help generate debate around issues of constitution-making, not necessarily a seminar that kick-started the process of constitution-making process or amendment in Zambia. Those are two different things, and I hope we're on the same page with that. But again, I would also encourage you as members of the press to get to the Zambia Law Development Commission, and they'll be able to guide you properly. And I think the majority of the discussions there was just to share experiences on how best we can have a constitution that is durable, a constitution that answers to the aspirations of the people of Zambia. Then there was a question that was raised by our colleague from the Mass newspaper. I don't know if colleagues did touch on that. He asked that the president in Kasama did announce that in agreement with members of civil society, we need now to amend the constitution. I don't know if I got it right. I think we should also be clear that the 14 organizations that are here are not in any way claiming we're the final voice of civil society. Civil society is very diverse. And civil society basically refers to an arena of voluntary actors away from business and state actors. So he might have met with other members of the civil society. And the challenge that I can put to you, members of the press, is to ask the president to name the members of civil society he met with and who agreed with him on the issues he raised. I remember going for a meeting at State House, was it last year, November or December, not as members of civil society, but as members of the national gender machinery. And one of the issues that was asked there, that was submitted by our team, was the need to have a broader female representation in elective bodies. And the president then said he took that into account and he will look at how we can address that. And he touched on issues of the constitution, but not in a very definite way. That was a meeting where he announced the voluntary recruitment of young people to ZNS. I think members of the press were also there, if you can recall that one. That is the most, as a member of civil society, I remember meeting the president and discussing issues relating to female representation. But there might have been other meetings. I don't work for State House, and I don't manage his diary, so he might be in a better place to know that. So that question should be directed to the proper office, which is his office. Just that I think we're clear, because I think for us as members of civil society, we may not be privy to which members among the broader sector of civil society he met with. Then for me, just to answer another question that Josiah did talk about in terms of contentious, non-contentious, and the Bill of Rights issues. One of the issues that has been a bit worrying for me in this whole constitution making process is that when President Hakainde Hichilema took over office, there were two very important speeches he gave us. His inaugural speech as president at Hero Stadium, and his inaugural speech when he was opening parliament. And these two speeches defined what his presidency was about: setting the country's economic path into the right way. He never spoke about the constitution. And the issue that is worrying me is between 2021 and 2024, when he announced in parliament those observations, what has significantly changed in terms of female representation, in terms of youth representation, to warrant a rushed process, a constitution-making process? You're looking at basically under a year before parliament is dissolved. Parliament will be dissolved around maybe March or April, thereabout. So time is not even on our hands. So why is this big appetite to change that? It's open to speculation, and as a Zambian, I want to think that it's only political reasons that are motivating this change, and this is why, as members of civil society, we seem not to be comfortable with that. And remember, the Constitution gives us a duty to defend it against any motive that might undermine it. And as civil society, we are being premised from that. But like Josiah did mention, the general principle for us is that we want the Constitution to be changed, but changed in a manner that does not serve partisan or personal interests. What will civil society do moving forward if the president or government go ahead with this process? This process is very reminiscent of the infamous Bill 10. And in Bill 10, just like we worked with this party when they were not in government, who galvanized the different sectors of Zambian society not to allow this to go through. Be it members of parliament, both from his party as well as from other political parties, ordinary Zambians in the marketplaces, members of the clergy, you as members of the press, to ensure that whatever constitution we come up with, it's a constitution that saves the people of Zambia and not any one individual or a political party, regardless of whether that party is in government or not in government. And that is how I would also want to answer the question relating to our friends from, relating to how we can have is it a commonality of approach with our friends from is it Tonse Alliance. We're not serving any partisan position. We're serving the people of Zambia, and our view is that the people of Zambia should be the ultimate winners in any process, especially one that touches on what unites them together, which is the constitution, and that is what we'll do. And whether Tonse meets with us on the way or not, that is a subject matter that is probably outside the scope of our discussion today.
Thank you so much. We take the next round of questions. Okay, we'll take the next round of questions, and this will be the last. And after that, we'll allow the high table, each of them to say one or two things. The next round of questions. Yes,
good morning. My name is Oscar. Yesterday, the president was on record saying people are opposing because they do not know what probably is available in the draft or the kind of this amendment. As a civil society, are you willing to dialogue with government over the matters that are going to be raised in this particular amendment? And maybe to add on that, if the matters which you are raising, you talk about the Bill of Rights in this representation, if they are part of the amendments which are being proposed, are you willing to move forward with the state?
okay. Any other question? Okay, yes, sir. Your name and the media.
I'm Dr. Adrian, representing Commerce. Article 52B of the Constitution explains clearly on who should participate or take part in being members of parliament or any political office. It's clearly stated there. Why is there so much talk, or that why is there a picture that is being painted to us that women and youths, the Constitution does not include them in them participating? That is why there is this reform. As a civil society, are there any clauses in the Constitution that does not allow women and youths to participate in governance?
Okay. Yes, Darius.
My name is Darius. You clearly talked about for me, I just want to get what are some of the aspects of be right according to your own analysis. And my other question, there are constitutional or new provisions that are being ignored or bypassed. And lastly, how much time do you think should be given to this amendment process as a society?
Okay, thanks so much. I'll allow my teacher to.
My question is similar to what the Finance is asking. This morning I was listening to Mr. President's community and indicated that the draft constitution is ready and that it will be published soon. But what I want to find out in this society organizations, don't you think your reaction is shortening with that because you have not seen the content of the draft amendment of the constitution?
Okay, thanks so much. My boss here is eager to respond, so start from the move the gadget. So what we'll do is that since it's the first, it will go that way. The high table is free to respond to any of the questions that are conveyed. Thank you.
Let me start with our good lady from, is it Prime TV? Sorry? Crown. My apologies for that, from Crown TV. That according to Mr. Hamasaka from State House, the draft bill is out and it's ready. And we as civil members of civil society, why are we commenting on this when we've not seen it? Two things, and I'll relate it to the question that the gentleman there also answered. Yesterday, the president did mention that why are people opposing the bill, the amendment bill, when they have not seen it? You know, it's more of the point, you know, let me just say, conversely, it's also saying, why are people supporting the bill when they've not seen it? As of yesterday, you want to give the president the benefit of the doubt to say there was no bill in place. Because my understanding of legislative process is that there is a team that is constituted through our colleagues at Ministry of Justice. They will draft the bill, then it's seconded to State House for approval through Cabinet, right? And before then, you say there's basically nothing. That's how the legal process goes. So what was the president supporting when he had not seen it? It was equally in the same boat as us, unless you say, agreeing with what you just from informing us that the bill has always been there, but it's only for the preserve of a few. That is where the problem is. You're talking about the law of the Republic of Zambia that creates institutions of the state and also tells me how I will relate to those institutions of the state, as well as how I will relate with Josiah, which is the Bill of Rights. Why should it only be for the preserve of the few? Is it also okay to speculate that it's only so because they want this bill to save only the interests of the few? So why should we as Zambians agree to that? That is where the problem is, and that's where we're coming from. The Constitution is not a document for any one individual institution. It's for the Republic of Zambia. It creates institutions which are funded by your money, called taxes. So why should one person or one group of people be the only ones who are privy to that? And then we should be okay because we have not seen it, so we shouldn't argue. Is that the question, a fair question that you as a Zambian, before you become a member of the fourth estate, the press should be entertaining? Only about 2 days ago, a member of the UPND, I think you call them the media director, said the Minister of Justice will soon release a detailed roadmap. Before the roadmap is released, the product of the roadmap is out. And we should be okay and proud. Good job. Let's hurry. And then let's just take a bit of a historical dive into the constitution making process. 1972 was badly handled, remember. KK was losing popularity. Everybody knows. Remember the election in Florida when he lost to the UPP for Kapwepwe? He hurried the constitution making process to save only his interest and UNIP's. It was hurriedly done, the Chona Constitution. Probably lessons were learned. 1990 rather, we had the Mvunga Commission. The Mvunga Commission hurried things up. And during the campaign for late President Chiruba, he did even mention, even when we win this election, we'll correct the hurriedness of the Mvunga Commission because it will only serve narrow interests and not national interests. And that's how the Mwanakato Constitution Review Team was formed in 1993. The Mwanakato Constitution, of course, it had that bad issue of wanting to bar late President Kaunda, but it was formed in 1993 and only concluded its work about 1996. When late President Mwanawasa came to power in 2003, he mentioned he formed, he established the Mwanakato Constitution Review process. By 2006 elections, that commission had concluded its work, but the government was not in a position to make changes to the constitution until 2007. Remember, when we were at the NCC. When late President Sata came in power, that was 2011, he formed the Sulungwe constitution making process in 2012. It wasn't the Sulungwe, it was the Sulungwe Technical Committee drafting the Zambian constitution. That one was not a commission. In 2012, It concluded its work shortly before President Sata, I think, passed about 2014 or thereabout, and was just on the shelves until 2016, January, when it was concluded, remember? So you're talking about 4 years there, the other one you're talking about 5 years, the other one about 6 years. Why is this one different? It can only take you to 1972 to serve narrow partisan interests and nothing more. And that is why we're saying, in as much as in principle we agree that we should change our constitution, and agree with some of the issues that have been mentioned in terms of having a larger number of female representation. I hope Leah is eager to answer that question. I don't want to take what she might say, like the question from you, like a woman can stand in any election. So what is the problem here? But what it's reminding us is that we may go back to 1972, where you just make a constitution to fit the personal and partisan interest of one person and one group of political actors, and this is not what we want. In principle, we agree we should amend our constitution, but not with the timing that we have now, with about less than 18 months to go before a general election. What have they been doing for the past 3 or 4 years when they took power? Why didn't they mention this process, say, in 2022? By now, it would have been concluded. This is where we're coming from, and I hope members of the press should be able to get that part of us. This is where we're coming from. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe just to add to what Mr. Kamal had mentioned, is it seems government is owning this process when the constitution should be owned by every citizen. And therefore, it should be a document that is owned by stakeholders, not just government giving citizens the constitution, but something which is arrived at by consensus and discussion. And this has not happened. And this is central to our opposition. Like I mentioned earlier, it's only last year where I believe my colleague was reprimanded by the Minister of Information for a press statement around constitutional reforms. Government's position was that there would be no constitutional reform. It has no intention to amend the constitution. So we've been actually campaigning, trying to bring government to the table to have this conversation around constitutional reform. But this conversation has not happened. We need to have the conversation. What is the extent of the reform? What's the process going to look like? Before we say, even a roadmap needs an agreement. We need to agree. What's the roadmap going to be like? How long is the process going to take? But that doesn't happen. And we need to have those conversations. On whether would be willing to dialogue with government, I think that's the essence of what civil society do. We want to dialogue with government. They are the decision makers and duty bearers to the citizen. They hold the lawmaking function. And we say we want a new constitution. So let's dialogue on what's the best way to arrive at a constitution that works for everybody. What's the best content of a constitution that works for everybody. So we are willing to dialogue with government. I believe everybody is willing to dialogue with government, but government should play this facilitatory role. Another concern around this entire process is from evidence around the world. You can't come up with a good constitution if you don't have consensus with politicians, with stakeholders, civil society, religious groups, traditional leaders, citizens. Government hasn't undertaken a deliberate process to ensure that there's consensus building. There's not only one party in Zambia. It's important that we build consensus amongst the different political level. That hasn't happened. There's been no deliberate step to build consensus amongst the political level. So as part of this process, as part of designing the constitutional approach, what has government done to address this political polarization? We can't come up with a good constitution within the current climate. As to provisions that allow for women's representation, I think Article 45, I believe, which sets out the principles for the electoral system, already provides, is the beginning of a framework for participation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And it sets out the mandatory, it sets out in mandatory terms that the system of elections shall ensure fair representation of various interest groups in society and gender equity in the National Assembly or Council. This is what's in the constitution right now. Further, Article 259 says if you are empowered to nominate, you should ensure that there should be equal nominations for women and men, equal gender nomination. When political parties are nominating candidates for political office. How many women are nominated by political parties? How many youth and persons with disability? So we already have provisions in the constitution that are ignored. And there's something which we discussed with the colleague before coming here. If you don't have this gender equity in your heart, you won't find it in the constitution. The constitution will provide the text, but you will ignore it still. So there are already provisions which are being ignored that can be applied, but they aren't. And I think Muzi covered shooting in the dark, but essentially the government shouldn't give people the constitution. Every constitution we've had says we the people give ourselves this constitution. So we should own the process. It shouldn't be government dictating, saying this document is ready, just approve it. No, citizens don't rubber stamp the constitution. They agree on the content, they agree on the structure of governance, and then they give themselves the constitution. This is the document that will govern us. Otherwise, the document does not have the legitimacy it requires. So it's important that as government plays an important role in this process, it recognizes that it's a stakeholder and the process should be owned by Zambia. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add a few thoughts as well. I think Muzi and Josiah have done a good job in terms of highlighting the key things. I think for us, part of the gist of our concern is just the lack of clarity that has been in terms of at least a particular process. I mean, you have in one breath you have a minister saying something else, then you have a party functionary, saying something completely different. And it's a mixed messaging. I think that in essence we are concerned about. But I also just wanted to make it very clear that the concerns that we are raising today and this advocacy that we are doing on this issue, it is not coming from without. Okay, we did not just wake up one day and say, let's do a joint thing on the constitution. These are things that we are speaking about for a very long time. Okay, for a very long time. And some of the concerns that we are highlighting, we have seen these things happen with previous processes. There has been precedents that we have seen. So when we raise concerns around, the danger of political interests, taking over the process and it responding to such interests, it's not just things that we are dreaming up. These are things that we have seen in the past. And the fact that we are seeing this process that the current administration wants to start or has started, we are seeing the same risks that have happened in the past, and we are seeing them, right along the path that we are proposing. And so it is our mandate as CSO to actually speak out and highlight those risks, because those are things that we have seen in the past. But so when I hear State House in the form of Mr. Hamasaka, press, whatever it is that it is, saying, giving an example that the previous constitution was also done in a relatively short time, like PF did it within a short time, talking about the 2016 one, and they're using that as a sort of measure to say even this can be done at the same pace. I think for us the concern is when did PF or any PF process really become the standard or the measuring rod that we should use ourselves against? If we go back to what the current ruling party was saying when they were in opposition, they promised to do things differently. Okay, and so it should never arise that they are highlighting a process that happened under the PF and using that as a yardstick or a measuring rod for their own, or to legitimize or to to justify their own process that they are doing now. So our challenge really is that do things differently. In the past, we have seen this process, constitutional making, being abused and being done in a hurried manner to the benefit of a very few select category of people. So our challenge to the current regime is, please do things differently. Let's not fall back on the same same processes that we have seen in the past that have not really yielded the sort of result that we want to achieve. Because if that process that is being made reference to, if it was successful, we would not be sitting here today because we would have had a perfect constitution, or as perfect as you can get it. But the fact that we still have the same issues, that we are highlighting in our statement today, shows that those previous processes have not given us the sort of constitution that we want for ourselves as citizens of this country. So our challenge to the current regime is do things differently, because you promise to do things differently. And that is the challenge that we are throwing to them. Thank you. You can go.
Okay, I just wanted to add a bit on the gender part, which I believe Josiah does have gender part, and explained it very well. For me, I think the true test of leadership lies in three important issues. Number one, honesty. And so if you look at the constitution making process, I believe that the government is not being honest around why they want to rush this process. So I think our challenge, my challenge as a woman in Zambia, is for the government to tell us what is in it for them. They are telling me what is in need for me as a woman, that most likely they are going to increase the number of constituencies by 30. And when I do the mathematics, you add 30 to 166. It still doesn't give me gender parity, because in that 30 states, you are saying maybe there are women. So let's say there are 8 women. They are saying they're young people. Let's say there are 8 young people. We are saying there are people with disabilities. Let's say there are 8 people with disabilities and other minority groups in the other. Still, it doesn't bridge the youth gap. It doesn't bridge the gender gap. And I'm using 30 because previously that's what the PF was telling us. It was around 30 or 80%. So as a woman, I'm failing to bite. And I'm willing to dialogue with the government to tell me how they'll bridge that gender gap. How an additional city, an additional number of states will give me the 50-50 parity as a young person, as a woman, as a person with disability. Secondly, the issue of transparency. We don't know what to believe. We're waiting for a roadmap. Then we are told there's already a draft constitution, a draft bill, and it might have something good for us as women. So which one is it? And if the preamble of the constitution in Article 1 says, we the people of Zambia give unto ourselves this constitution, where did I participate in the current draft bill that is there? So we need also clarity on that one. So government must be transparent. Are we starting this process on a blank sheet, or there's something written already that we need to debate? The third one is accountability. Every leader must be willing to be accountable, especially those that are elected. They must be accountable to us, the electorates. They must be accountable to the citizens of Zambia. And through accountability, there must be demonstrative leadership. And this is why when we go even for job interviews, we're asked about our experience. So if I have to ask the current government in terms of their experience bridging the gender gap, looking at the many provisions that Josiah spoke to, we have Article 45, we have 259, we have the Gender Equity and Equality Commission that's not implemented, we have the National Gender Policy that speaks to 50-50. What is their track record in trying to bridge the gender gap? And I think we heard just on the 8 nominated seats, we have 2 women, so they've not done well. Finally, we need to cut the cloth. We need to cut the dress according to the available cloth. So if currently we have 166 seats, we need to ensure that those are representative of the kind of people we have in Zambia. We can't say, no, this cake, us, the children of the house who eat, your visitors, we have to increase for you to partake of this cake. We want representation in what is currently available in terms of the institutions in Zambia, and not being promised that the new constituencies are going to respond to our needs. So I think that is very important. And I'd like to echo what Josiah said, that gender must be in us. It must be at heart. We will not find gender equality or the need to ensure that we do unto others what we want done unto them, unto ourselves, we will not find that in the Constitution. Is within the way we live, how we use the power that we currently have. And I think for us, that's what the challenge is to the president. That's what the challenge is to the other people that are supporting the president to govern.
So colleagues, for us, we will continue to assign one important issue. Process protects the content. So it's not more about the content of what that bill is likely to have. Obviously, we have extensively spoken to how that can be arrived at. So it's about the process. It's very disappointing that we cannot learn from failed processes. It's very disappointing. I think this regime had a much difference events around constitution making processes that did not result in desired content and product. So, ladies and gentlemen, wrong timing has always been a problem. The environment is not conducive for proper constitution making process. We are all agreed, or you may agree, to the fact that there is political polarization, too much politicking, sometimes even noble exercise can fail because of the environment. Remember that when we had a failed referendum on the Bill of Rights, the badness was not in the content. If you go back to the Bill of Rights, you will see that it was a progressive document. It was a progressive document. But that failed because it was brought alongside the elections. It was brought at a wrong time, where there was too much political polarization, too much politicization of everything. So it failed. Now, the environment that we are having now, is not any different from what we experienced in 2016 with the referendum flow, but also around any processes that are close to elections. And so, even if we are to come up with better content, good content on the Constitution, I can rest assure you that the process is likely to fail because of polarization of politics. We have already seen what is happening from those who are on the opposite side. Yeah? Do you think we can easily reach consensus before elections? So this is the wrong time for us to embark on this process. So as we have fair clear the statement, then we do it after 2026.
Then give the opportunity to Director.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to emphasize that the issue here is not that the society does not understand the need for us to change the constitution that is flawed, and that is an issue that needs to be aligned, or that we do not, we can be resisting the change of the constitution. When UPND came into office, I think just about every organization from this place called for a comprehensive review of the constitution. In 2021, government refused to do so. Our resistance now is about the time. So yes, the same organization that had said, and even called is trying to meet the Minister of Justice when he was Minister Haimbe then. We had so much interaction, background discussion, trying to push for it. We're told it was not possible. We knew we needed the constitution. I mean, the reason why we think it can't happen now is exactly what we have. The timing is absolutely wrong. We are in a period of high tension and lower trust. It always happens around elections. It's also a good to know that constitutions are captured by the ruling party. So maybe we need to reiterate. We are calling for the amendment of this constitution immediately after. We want this constitution amendment immediately after this election. And we hope we won't find ourselves here again in 2030 when whoever is in office starts saying they want to change the constitution. Can we please do this in 2026 September? Maybe that makes it clear, so that we can have consensus, so that we can have a process that is divorced from political tensions and is owned by the people. There's also the question of just resources. Where does the money come from? Now when we should be raising money for elections, now when we have issues of President Trump having withdrawn money that is required for ARVs, now that we are coming from the drought, we just don't have the resources to direct to what has become not urgent because of the delay of the very sitting government. And finally, I think I also like to repeat what Josiah said, which is that President Hichilema has not shown commitment to gender parity. In his appointment, you see the Zambian president is extremely powerful. The Zambian president can reflect his belief in appointments in what he said. So, a president who is committed to gender parity would have a different looking cabinet, different looking appointments already, because the constitution as it is, even if the provisions that were mentioned by Josiah and the others were not there, just because you believe in it, you will see it in the provisions. That hasn't happened. So pushing for a constitutional amendment for that reason just doesn't seem to be extremely convincing. So yes, can we have an amendment in 2026 after the elections? And this time, can the process please be given to the people before any draft, before any other conversation? Can we all agree as a people that this is how we'll go about it? This is how we'll achieve consensus? Because if we don't, we'll continue sitting on these desks. I mean, how many times has civil society come back to resist what we see as a constitutional amendment process that does not favor what the people want. So process, timing is what we are asking for. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. We are drawing to the end of our press briefing, and I will invite the Executive Director for Civil Society for Poverty Reduction to give us a closing remarks. You have one time.
No, I wanted to add to what Mr. Nyambe had said. Just a quick one thing. Okay, so I want to add to what Mr. Nyambe had said. You remember he said that the current government should do things different from the PF government, which I agree on. But more than that, so they should do things not only different, but also the right. I think that should be made very clear. And then to just add to what Madam Tavi said about gender parity in terms of addressing it to the question that was asked. Maybe the biggest challenge we have between now and 2026 elections is for the president to operationalize Article 231 on the establishment of the Gender Equity and Equality Commission. And then more than that, also to commence the implementation of the Gender Equity and Equality Act number 15 of 2015 to address issues related to gender. Because the commission will have legal force to force private players, including public, such as political parties, on ensuring that the articles that Josiah mentioned are also implemented. Why has UPND, why has PF not chosen 50% of their candidates in local government elections, mayor elections, as well as parliamentary elections? And that would be, for now, I think, an interim measure that can address the burning issue of having lesser women in elective positions, as we try to ponder over the roadmap before we come up with a document that Mr. Hamasaka has hurriedly come up with. I think that would be the best way for in addressing those issues, and that's a challenge to have.
Thank you so much. The closing remarks.
Thank you so much to our colleagues for all the questions asked. I think every question was relevant, important also to inform our continued reflection on this very important action. And as we draw a conclusion to today's press briefing, we just want to back to two things. Number one is that the constitution making process is an important national undertaking whose agreement and consensus have not been delivered through asking key questions around commemorative days, because the people that have been engaged and somewhat given this consent that is being reported on, and where we see additional pronouncements rising on when unprepared to have such a thing. We all know that in national undertaking of the constitutional process, a clear roadmap is required. And because we have not seen it to fully understand and comprehend what the thinking of government is and what is driving it, as civil society, we are saying this process is a window-dressed process. It is also reflective of a manipulative approach to getting women, youth into the realm of believing that a delimitation process, increasing the number of constituents, will therefore enable representation of women and youth. And we have provided quite a number of justifications why this is the situation right now. We appeal to the Republican President, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, to reflect on the submissions we have made today, because these are very important, they're paramount. They are very reflective, actually, of voices of the people. I know many times we're is usually patient are the ones that have the capacity to go out and sensitize, help government actually to understand, what it is that government is trying to do. As has already been said, our position is very clear on this matter. If government is sincere and honest, like what was said earlier on, this process will be postponed to September of 2026. And we believe that the government should not attempt to divide civil society actually around this matter, and that they need to fully understand that the civil society sector is broader than the organizations we are seeing here. Consultations still need to be made at provincial level. Even in the district, people need to understand what is really going on, what this roadmap means. We also advise against having party officials making public announcements about a national undertaking such as this one. It is government responsibility, like constitution, not a party responsibility. And it should not be justified in the manner we are seeing. We see quite a bit of impunity actually applied when we listen to people like Max Mwe and others who are justifying that a constitution was delivered in a similar manner by the patriotic government. Now, if we are a learning country, a country that is espousing to deliver strong governance, good governance for that matter, I think we should be willing to learn. And my colleagues here have indicated previous processes. Why are we bent on having Zambians go through the very same issues that they are trying to come up? So our appeal is that civil society will not support the manipulative process. We will not support anything that is short of the democratic process that is required for an important national undertaking such as this one. And as we end, we'd like to thank all of you for coming. Should you have any further questions, our contacts, our details are available to TIZ, and we are willing to dialogue with you, even in the media, should we require that interaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And this marks the end of our press briefing today. We fairly thankful for us, and as usual, colleagues from the media, I think Madam Safi will attend school. Thank you so much for coming.